Welcome to Lesson 7 of Module 8. In this video, we're going to be looking at epidemiological studies. Now, if you looked carefully in the last video, you would have seen the same inquiry question about epidemiology. So we're going to look at this video about what epidemiology is. We're going to evaluate the method used in this, and then we're going to look at some of the benefits of engaging in epidemiological studies. So epidemiology is the study of the distribution and determinants of health-related states or events, which include disease, and the application of this study to the control of diseases and other health problems. It does lead to improvement in the overall health of the population. Epidemiology has three main aims: to describe the disease and the patterns in human population, to identify the causes of these disease and other health-related events, and then to provide data essential for the management, evaluation, and planning of the services for prevention, control, and treatment. Professionals who work in the area of epidemiology are known as epidemiologists, and it combines the disciplines of medicine, health sciences, social sciences, and statistics, also some detective work, and I guess this makes the profession of epidemiologists quite interesting and varied. So there are different types of studies. So we can look at observational, experimental, and then from there we can see some other terms that are going to be given. And I'm going to go through the best as I can in this video about the different types of studies that we can undertake if we are in fact undertaking an epidemiological study. Analytical studies are planned investigations that test a specific hypothesis. Morbidity and mortality are used in these studies, as well as incidence and prevalence. We can have case-controlled studies or cohort-controlled studies. And when we talk about case control, it's where we compare people with the disease to people without the disease and therefore make a conclusion. In cohort control, we're looking at two or more similar groups of people who are free of the disease that differ in one. So we compare the disease incidence. So one factor is different in these cohort studies. So in the image here, we see one of the groups being exposed to the risk factor and then others not being exposed to the risk factor, and following up and comparing whether they in fact do contract or end up with a disease. When we talk about descriptive studies, these show patterns in the way a disease is distributed in the population. So we can look at the frequency of disease, a section of the population, so where we can look at age, gender, occupation, or socioeconomic status. We can compare geographical locations, or we can in fact look at different time periods. There's also experimental studies, and these are used to affect the effectiveness of treatment or the effectiveness of a public health campaign. And the aim is to change the behaviour of the population or to reduce the incidence of the disease. And we can look at controlled studies, which are often used to test the effectiveness of a new type of drug. And in these kind of groups, one group receives the trial, the other group receives the placebo, and then there's a randomized trial in the controlled studies, or we have quasi-experimental, where the researcher chooses the subjects who receive the drug treatment. Some facts about epidemiological studies. They have to be conducted over a long period of time, and for epidemiological studies to be conducted well, they must study very large sample sizes, so somewhere in the thousands. A range of relevant data needs to be collected from a group of affected and unaffected people for comparison, and it usually includes participants that represent the wider population. If control groups are used, they are people who are not exposed to the potential cause of the disease, and data that needs to be collected includes the incidence, prevalence, mortality, and morbidity rates of the disease. There needs to be some statistical analysis of the data to identify patterns and trends. A management plan with strategies is developed, and then they evaluate the effectiveness of the control and treatment programs. So this is really useful in learning how to design and make sure epidemiological studies are something that the community will benefit from. There are, however, some errors that may come up in epidemiological studies. So there can be random errors, which are unpredictable variations. They have an inconsistent effect of measurement. These do make the studies less precise. However, they do not shift the results of the study in a particular direction and can usually be corrected using statistics. There are also systematic errors, also known as bias, and this can be any process that causes a consistent deviation in measurement from what the true value should be. It may result in an incorrect estimate, and it can include selection bias, so how we select our subjects, but also information bias, so errors in taking measurements or recording the information. Data is usually collected through interviews and questionnaires. And established healthcare systems can provide lots of information. So we often see these not happening in places that don't have established healthcare systems. Census data is often compiled and used. And as I just mentioned, developing countries usually lack these services and the communication skills to collect the data and therefore use them in epidemiological studies. That concludes our video. Make sure you tune in for our next video in the Module 8 series.